Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. Now, I've got quite a few things to talk about tonight, but as usual, I'll start off with a few business items to bring you up to date with things. The first thing, which I'll mention a few times through the live stream so everyone can hear, hopefully, is that as of next week, we're changing the time of the live stream. We're going to go to a Tuesday, and we're going to go to 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. The reason we're changing to a Tuesday is that we're wanting to have more people involved in the live stream, and most of the people who want to be involved to be helping out with it, they can't actually make a Wednesday, but Tuesday suits them much better. So as of next week, we're going to be on a Tuesday, and the 9 till 10 slot, our thinking is, particularly in the summer, earlier in the evening, maybe if you've got kids, you're getting the kids to bed, or you might have other things that you've got to do in the evening, you're doing some gardening or whatever. But then 9 till 10 is maybe more the time when people are settling down and are going to listen to something or to watch something like this. So it's going to be Tuesday, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. From next week onwards. Now, one of the features we're adding, again, from next week, is that we're going to have a slot where someone else comes along who's done some research on a particular topic. And they found a piece of research that's particularly interesting from the family party policy point of view, and then we're going to present the facts about this area, and then we'll have a quick discussion about it, and that will be part of the show. That might be, just a 10 or 15 minute slot. Then the person who's presented that, they might stick around as well for some of the questions and to discuss some of the other things. We're also looking at having more people on to do interviews with, but now we're settled on the date, we'll try and get some of those fixed up. Another idea we had as well is that within the hour of the formal show, we'll do some news items, we'll have the facts slot, maybe an interview with someone, and then after an hour, we'll close formal business. But then there's a possibility as well, if there's lots of people commenting, etc., we might carry on informally after the hour, just responding to questions and having a chat, I say more informally. Now, another news item to do with the live stream is Facebook sent a message this week, and they said the way they deal with live streams has changed. So if you're watching this on Facebook, it's saying what you need to do is to click subscribe and to click the bell as well to get notifications, which you also should do on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe and click the bell for notifications if you haven't done that. But apparently, if you're on Facebook, there also should be that option on the screen now. If there's not, I'm very sorry, but Facebook said that they thought there would be. So subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Then that will make it more likely that you'll be notified when we're live next time. Otherwise, you might not get that warning when we're getting going. Okay, this evening's discussion. What have we got? Well, I've got a few news stories from the last few days. And it so happens they're pretty well all to do with education. So there's a bit of an education theme going through the live stream tonight. And the first story is to do with the Educational Institute of Scotland, which is Scotland's largest teaching union. And they're the largest by quite some margin, I understand. They're having a special online event for Pride Month. And they're inviting teachers and their families to come along and celebrate Pride Month with them. There's various things in it, drag artists, the person who made the Green Party's part political broadcast, I mean, it says it all, doesn't it? Is taking part in it, etc. But there's one item on their program that is particularly interesting. So let's have a look at this. It says, Joe Clifford is a playwright, performer, proud father and grandmother. What? Father and grandmother? Right, okay. Based in Edinburgh, author of over 100 plays in every dramatic medium, many of which have been performed around the world. Joe will be performing two extracts from her The Gospel According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven. The play invites us to imagine Jesus coming back to earth in the present day as a trans woman. Now, the Educational Institute of Scotland think that's a suitable thing to show to all their members. They're obviously just assuming, I assume, that there are no members who are Christians, who will probably be quite offended by that, upset about that. They'd really strongly object to that, having their money spent on that, their membership fees spent on that. So quite a few people have been in touch with that. about that. First thing I would say is if you're in the Educational Institute of Scotland, I'd just leave. Okay, phone them up tomorrow, tell them why, and demand a refund for the rest of the year and say you're finished with them. Now, the tricky question then is there a better option in terms of a teaching union in Scotland? Well, to be honest, you're struggling. There's the SSTA, who refused to support me during my recent case with the General Teaching Council of Scotland. They gave some other excuse, but the real reason was they didn't want to support me because of what the issue was. So even though it was found I was completely innocent, my union still wouldn't defend me in that, despite the fact that I'd been paying my fees for all of those years. But maybe there's another teaching union out there that isn't quite as bad as the EIS or maybe the SSTA. But it's appalling that they're doing this. And it just illustrates the state of Scottish education, that within the teachers' union, they just feel that this is mainstream and is not going to be controversial, just something you can put on for the benefit of your members, a show about a transgender Jesus. I mean, the obvious point to make, it's probably too obvious to even bother making, would they even dream of doing anything remotely as controversial about Muhammad or a figure from another religious tradition? Well, I think the answer is probably no. But when it comes to Christianity, it seems it's open season. So hopefully the Educational Institute of Scotland will lose members and will be suitably embarrassed over that. We'll certainly see what we can do in the suitably embarrassed department. Right. Now, what other stories have I been having a look at? Now, this is an interesting one. Since I've had my business with the General Teaching Council of Scotland, I occasionally go onto their website and have a look at what other cases they've been dealing with. I mean, recently there was someone who was bragging about having sex with a 14-year-old girl. I wouldn't even go into the other things he bragged about. I wouldn't even like to mention them. I think he was struck off. Various other quite outrageous things that have gone on. But I came across this one today. This is the most recent case that they've dealt with. And it's about a teacher who's not named in a primary school. It seems to be a mainstream primary school, not some sort of special school. And, well, I'll tell you about the case. So a witness reports that this teacher became angry with a 6-year-old pupil and grabbed the pupil, maybe by the arm, hand, shoulder, whatever, grabbed him and then shouted in his face, "What a naughty boy." Okay, so teacher got angry, grabbed the pupil, maybe by the arms, shoulders, hands, whatever, got down to his ground level and shouted at him, "What a naughty boy." Okay, so let's have a look at what this pupil had been doing. This is the teacher's report that the General Teaching Council of Scotland accepted. So, in the lesson, pupil A began to get excited and began throwing foam pieces around like jigsaw puzzle pieces. Pupil A was running around, barging into her and witness 1. He tried to run out of the room, but the teacher blocked his way. Pupil A started kung fu chopping and kicking. The teacher explained to him that his behavior was unacceptable. Don't just hate that word, unacceptable. No. Wearing the wrong color socks is unacceptable. Okay, attacking teachers is not unacceptable. It's beyond the pale, outrageous, appalling, not unacceptable. Anyway, and in doing so, she used the word, in speech marks, naughty. That sounds pretty serious. Fancy using the word naughty. So the person reporting her and the teacher herself, obviously, I say herself, himself, whatever, they obviously feel a bit ashamed, a bit embarrassed that they used such a term as naughty. I mean, fancy calling a boy naughty while he's attacking you. I mean, this teacher really needs to get a grip and not respond in that sort of way, do they not? So use the word naughty because he would understand that. She did, to her regret, raise her voice. So this teacher raised her voice while she was being attacked by a 6-year-old boy. She took him by the arm, whatever, and said he was naughty. She raised her voice as she said that. And then this teacher is finding herself before the General Teaching Council of Scotland, how long later? 4 years after the event, still having to account for it. She put her hands on pupil A's shoulders. The teacher is a female. On pupil A's shoulders and got down to his level At that point, he was kicking and butting. The teacher used diversion and de-escalation techniques, and he calmed down and completed the planned lesson. What do you think of that then? So this 6-year-old boy has been attacking the teacher, assaulting the teacher, but the teacher manages to calm him down, and then the lesson carries on. No, the lesson should not be carrying on. That boy should be off to see the head teacher, and he should be made to think, wow, I am never going to do that again. That was an absolutely huge incident. That's absolutely basically transformed my week, transformed my relationship with the school. I was in such major trouble with that he really learned his lesson. Did that happen? No. He was calmed down, then the lesson continued. I've heard stories like this from schools lots of times. This is just, it just illustrates what's going on in schools. Anyway, so the lesson continued, which included playing a game where pupil A had to use a bamboo fishing rod with a net on the ends to fish for letters. Pupil A calmed down sufficiently. The colleague 1 was able to leave. That's someone who came in to help out. There's already, seems like 2-to-1 ratio with this boy, leaving the teacher and witness 1 with pupil A. However, pupil A again became restless and uncontrolled. He was running around with the fishing rods, butting and punching, banging off the walls, and karate kicking. He began kicking the teacher, and then he lay down on a beanbag where he waved the fishing rods. The teacher was concerned that he might poke himself in the eye with the fishing rods, so she removed them from him. Pupil A then began banging his head off the ground. The teacher intervened to bring him gently to his feet. However, he then continued with his uncontrolled behavior. Though she had removed the fishing rods from him, the teacher was still worried because there were lots of other dangers in the classroom, including sharp edges on furniture. Pupil A had no awareness of danger. The teacher again tried diversion and de-escalation techniques, but they were unsuccessful at this time. No hint that he was just going to get one hugely serious punishment for this. No hint that it just needs de-escalating, and he needs diverting, so he gets his mind on something else instead of attacking the teacher, and then the problem's solved, apparently. Anyway, pupil A tried to leave the room, but the teacher stood in his way. This resulted in pupil A repeatedly hitting, kicking, and butting the teacher. The teacher wanted to calm him down. There was nobody around who could provide assistance. She had to make an educated decision quickly. She held him by the wrists and again got down to his level. She then put her hands on the top of his arms to try to explain to him that he was behaving dangerously. She denied shaking or pulling him. She explained that pupil A was trying to pull away from her, and he was moving his body and arms while doing so. The teacher then decided to take pupil A to the kitchen to get him ready to go home. In the course of this, pupil A ran off and began behaving in an uncontrolled way again. Right, it sounds to me like this teacher is an absolute saint, and probably this boy needs to get more than he bargained for in the future. Because if this is the cycle, you attack a teacher, then it seems like basically nothing happens. As long as you calm down and get on with your work, it's all forgotten about, and that's all fine. I mean, it's a great advert for teaching this, isn't it? I mean, trained as a teacher in Scotland, and you too could be facing these situations. And if you take this boy by the arm for his own safety and say he's been naughty, you raise your voice as he's attacking you, you might find yourself facing a 4-year ordeal at the hands of the General Teaching Council for Scotland. So this teacher, in her defense, in her pleading for her career, she said she would not raise her voice again, even if she was being attacked by a pupil. That's what she had, the assurance that she gave in order to try and save her career. As she denied that the restraint she used was in any way inappropriate or unnecessary, she reached the conclusion that pupil A could get hurt, and so she decided she needed to intervene. She accepted that it would not usually be appropriate to restrain a pupil by holding their wrists. On this occasion, she held pupil A by the hands to stop him hurting herself. I mean, part of the accusation was that she grabbed this boy by the wrists, but she claimed, it wasn't a grab, it was more gentle. As if while you're being attacked, to grab him by the wrist. I mean, that would clearly be going too far. Using the word naughty, that was obviously a bit over the top, they seem to think. Shouting, they think, while you're being attacked. Oh no, that was a bit much as well. So what happened at the end with this? So the General Teaching Council of Scotland, their lawyer was saying to the panel, this teacher should be struck off for this incident. But the panel basically said they didn't accept that. They thought the reports of the other witnesses were unreliable. They believed what the teacher said, and she can now carry on teaching 4 years later. So that was an interesting little insight into Scottish education. That's similar to so many stories I've heard where a teacher is, attacked or there's utterly appalling behavior, but the objective is to just calm the pupil down. And if they be calmed down, so they stop kicking the teacher and stop smashing the place up, if you've calmed them down, that's success. That's victory. And that's all that's expected. That's how low standards are. That's how low expectations of behavior are in a lot of schools. So that was an interesting case. So have we got any comments about this? Yeah, someone says they read through the cases as well. I mean, most of them are really clear cut. I mean, these people just need striking off because they are just utterly beyond the pale, the things that they've done. But this one, you just think, what is going on? Now, I understand that there's another 2 or 3 cases with the General Teaching Council of Scotland that are a bit similar to mine. People who said the wrong thing on the trans issue or LGBT issue or whatever. So we'll follow those when they come out. One of them's our own Pauline Gallagher, obviously. I already know about that case. There's a video about that. Okay. Reasonable and proportional force is allowed under the law. Indeed it is. I mean, this is the era of children's rights, though. I mean, in schools now, I mean, you've seen the SNP's redefinition of child abuse they're proposing. They really do think children are so delicate that anyone, even saying that they're naughty or raising their voice or taking them by the arm, they just assume that children are so delicate that that's what's really going to do the damage to them. The fact that they're running amok and are learning the worst lessons possible in terms of character development, that they can be utterly aggressive and obnoxious and uncooperative, and you just get away with it. In fact, the more awful you are, the nicer they are to you in return. So they're being harmed by completely the wrong message being delivered, but they think that actually responding to this sort of behavior with any sort of firmness, that's what really does harm to the children. So that's that case. Quite remarkable what's gone on there. Now, I realized after last week's live stream, part of the billing, I would just say something about Emperor Hadrian. I actually spelled Hadrian wrong as well. But anyway, Emperor Hadrian. And I realized afterwards I didn't get round to it and I forgot. So I thought I would now just mention my little snippet I was going to say about Emperor Hadrian. It's not really relevant to the Scottish Family Pod, but just thought it was interesting enough to just share with you. Because I thought Emperor Hadrian, his actions actually are a significant part of things that were in the news, well, particularly a couple of weeks ago and last week. I've been in Scotland all the time. I mean, one of them obviously was the building of Hadrian's Wall. Now, what Emperor Hadrian did, the Roman emperor, was there were problems in a lot of parts of the Roman Empire. So what he did was he went on a tour, and wherever he went, he tried to solve the problem once and for all. Or even if he didn't go there, if he heard about a problem, he'd think, right, what can we do to solve this problem once and for all? And then that's what he did. So in Britain, they had problems. They couldn't really rule all of what's now Scotland. So there are problems of how far they wanted the empire to expand, and there was people raiding it, etc. So what was the solution? And the solution was, we'll build a wall. They tried to build walls in other places, but they tried that. We'll build Hadrian's Wall. That will solve the problem. And people say the building of Hadrian's Wall was quite a significant part of the process that led to a distinctive Scottish identity, which obviously is with us today as an extremely live issue, to say the least, in terms of Scottish nationalism, as opposed to unionism. So Emperor Hadrian's decision to build a wall between what's England and Scotland played a very significant part in what's now the dominant issue, unfortunately, in Scottish politics. But the other thing in the news last week, the week before, was the Israel-Palestine conflict. And that's to a significant extent as well. It stems from Emperor Hadrian's decisions, because the problem they had there was really the Jews were pretty awkward customers. They rebelled in sort of 66 AD. That ended with the siege of Jerusalem, destruction of Jerusalem, as prophesied by Jesus in the New Testament. Then they rebelled again. Was it 110 AD? Then they rebelled again. Was it 137 AD? And then we've got Emperor Hadrian on the scene. So he said, look, we've got a big problem here. These Jews, they just keep rebelling and rebelling and rebelling. It's a real pain in the neck. Right? How can I solve this problem once and for all? So Emperor Hadrian decided, well, the way to do it is we'll flatten Jerusalem. We will throw out every single Jew in that area, in Israel, basically. We'll make them move somewhere else. And then we're going to repopulate Jerusalem and the surrounding area. We're going to repopulate it with other people. And we're not going to call it Judea anymore. We're going to call it Palestine from now on. And then the Jews are just gone forever. So that was his plan, to solve the problem forever. And you could say about that one as well, it didn't quite work out that way, because I mean, that really is the heart. Well, I mean, the story goes a long time way before that, and there's a lot of parts to it after that. But it's a very significant part of the story that's led to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that we have at the moment. So that was just interesting. It crossed my mind about having Emperor Hadrian in the background of both of those news stories. Right, what do we got here? I was told the punishment has no benefits. The behavior in the school is poor. Connection. Well, yes, obviously. When I was teaching, I was in training produced by Education Scotland, where the whole theme of the training is to lead you to the conclusion that punishments really don't work. And some of it really was this ridiculous. It would be the point of saying to you, if you've done something wrong, do you like to be punished, or would you rather someone just talks to you about it? Well, of course, everyone's going to say, oh, yes, I think just talking to me is the best way. No one says, oh, well, normally people won't say, no, I think a good stern punishment is what's best for me. So they start from that and then just go down this track. The punishment doesn't work. So, yeah, I've heard that sort of thing too. Right, moving on. What else have we got from the world of education? Right, a few people have sent this to me. It's a document from Education Scotland, and it's to tackle misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories with regard to COVID-19. So Education Scotland has put this out to all schools with the intention for it, I assume, to go to all teachers, so that the teachers are on the alert and ready to correct and watch out for the warning signs of pupils being drawn into extremism. It's under that banner because of COVID-19, disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy theories. I mean, it says here, extremists are seeking to exploit COVID-19 to spread hateful narratives and increase mistrust and division. I mean, people are using COVID-19 to try and increase division. Or some people might accuse Nicola Sturgeon of that. On the other hand, some people might accuse, like Boris Johnson, a unionist, of trying to use COVID-19 to increase the sense of British national solidarity. But this idea that there's some sort of extremism here within the disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy theories. I mean, by extremists, I normally think they're like meaning violent extremists. If they're saying, we want to help you to spot Islamic extremists or right-wing extremists, you'd be thinking of people who are going to get a gun or a bomb or something, wouldn't you? But coronavirus conspiracy theories, is that really under the same banner? Is that really a form of extremism? This should be treated the same way? But I would say my views about coronavirus are fairly mainstream. I think the lockdowns have been excessive. I think we should be out of them now, well and truly. But my views are sort of fairly mainstream. But I know a lot of people who've had different views what some people might call conspiracy theories, or they've just taken a different view about vaccines or whatever else, the efficacy of lockdowns. These dangerous extremists, these are the sort of people that Education Scotland should be saying to schools, be alert to the danger that pupils might be being influenced by these people, who might well be, for example, their parents. I just think it's out of order. It seems routine in Scottish education that they believe there's one true truth and their mission is to teach it to the pupils. And that's the case here. The sort of mainstream government narrative, which is like the same as the BBC narrative about coronavirus, that's what has to be promoted to pupils. And if they're deviating from that, that's a problem that needs to be solved. It's not an issue to debate. It's not something to discuss in an intelligent manner. It's not something where you just need to teach about science, teach facts, and then have the discussion, look at the facts on different sides of the argument, etc. No, it's not that. This is a problem that needs to be solved. A bit more detail from the other side of this letter. The Commission for Countering Extremism have highlighted numerous examples of prominent extremist narratives relating to the pandemic. Right, here they are. Anti-Semitic conspiracies blaming the Jewish community for spreading the virus or suggesting that COVID-19 is a Jewish plot. Right, I mean, that really would be sort of off the scale. I'm not sure I've seen anyone saying that, but okay. Claims that British Muslims have flouted social distancing rules and spread COVID-19. Right. Well, the first thing I think with that is it true? Well, I'm sure it is. Same as every other sort of person in Britain's flouted COVID rules and contributed to spreading it to some extent. So I'm sure that's happened. I'm sure there's some people who will have deliberately drawn attention where it was Muslims because that fits their agenda. Maybe it is the case that there's been more flouting of the rules among certain groups. I don't know. Is it true? Is it not true? But that's not the issue here. It's just this needs stamping out. Narratives promoting anti-Chinese hatred. Now, again, I tend to hear about this secondhand. Have you ever come across any of that? I mean, these are tiny minority views, surely. So Islamic State-inspired narratives claim that the pandemic is divine punishment for the West's sinful behaviors, using this to promote the need for a caliphate in the West. Okay, so if you've got a Muslim, say, a Muslim preacher says he believes that coronavirus is God's punishment for the West's sinful behaviors. I don't know why it's happening all over the globe, but let's say someone believes that. Does that make them a dangerous extremist? Does the school need to be setting out to putting that pupil straight, correcting their views, telling them that maybe their parents are wrong about that? I don't think so. I'm not quite on board with Education Scotland here. Extreme right-wing conspiracies claiming that society is collapsing, okay, and that right-wing terrorism could accelerate its end through inciting social conflict, violence, and ultimately a race war. Right. I mean, that really is off the wall. I mean, do those views exist? Maybe in a minuscule number of people. Has that got anything to do with COVID-19? Doesn't appear to. It just seems to be that these are sort of regular bogeymen to bring out. Wider conspiracy theories relating to 5G, test and protect, and anti-vax, which can be detrimental to public health messaging. Okay, so they're classed as extremist themes. Now, I've made videos about some of these things, so you'll know. I'm not. I know I don't buy into any conspiracy theories relating to coronavirus. But does that make people extremists? Is it the teacher's mission to be alert to these dangers? I really don't think so. If someone brings that up in the class, then there should be discussion. Okay, maybe put the other side of the argument, but it's not a problem, an official problem to solve. The teacher has a duty to persuade the pupil that this is not right, or they're an extremist. They should be reported as an extremist. Presumably their parents would come under suspicion as well for being extremists if they're holding these views. I mean, how about some things that are missing there? How about the view that we're on the point of being taken over by fascists. There are fascists left, right, and centre. So we need to go and fight them in the streets in order to rescue our society from fascism. I mean, that's the philosophy of Antifa. I mean, that's as wacky as any conspiracy theory going. Oh, Education Scotland didn't quite get round to including that one. How about if we don't abandon capitalism within 10 years, there's going to be a global climate catastrophe and the planet is going to become uninhabitable? Okay, how about that? I mean, is that a dangerous extremist message? Is that supported by the facts? Well, is that the sort of thing Education Scotland are ever going to put on their list? Obviously not. That doesn't go on the list. That more likely goes on the curriculum rather than the list. So that was interesting. That was, say, Education Scotland's take on COVID-19 extremism and the way they want schools to counter it. A little concerning, I would suggest. A conspiracy label. This is pathetic using the race card. And that's absolutely true. Labeling something a conspiracy theory doesn't add anything to understanding of it. Conspiracy theory is usually used as a pejorative term, and it means conspiracy theory that's a bit ridiculous, not supported by the facts, and doesn't really have credibility. That's the way people use it. But obviously, believing in conspiracies, we would want to believe in conspiracies in proportion to the degree that there are actually conspiracies taking place. So there's not a sort of hard and fast rule whether you should believe in conspiracies or not. Just assess them according to the evidence. Quite agree. Right, if you want to see extreme, they need to look in the mirror. Well, there's a lot to be said for that. I think the policy of abolishing punishment is extremely extreme in terms of education. Their whole approach to every educational issue is extreme. They don't seek a balance between traditional and progressive or whatever. They just want to go further and further in the progressive direction. And if it's not working, the answer is always, you've got to go even further in the progressive direction. So I suggest in that sense, yep, they are indeed extreme. Yeah, let's not forget the F off English banners from the Scottish border. Yeah, and that's again, yeah, that clearly would be an example of extremism. Would that be the sort of thing that the Education Scotland would want to include? Probably not. Primary teachers need to concentrate on teaching kids to count and spell and tell the time. Education has gone downhill rapidly in the last few years. Indeed. And I'm going to come on to that next, because in Scottish education, how much attention is paid to these core skills, the actual fundamentals of education? Well, that brings me neatly onto the next point. Well, I've got here Teaching Scotland. This is General Teaching Council of Scotland's magazine. Now, the reason I'm going to look at it, I'm just going to have a quick flip through. It's a reimagining education. Now, because obviously it's well known, well documented that academic standards in Scotland have declined consistently over a long period of time. And Scottish education did have very high standards, and it's now mediocre at best and sliding. The slide is continuing. So what have they got in Teaching Scotland? So standards in numeracy, literacy, these have really been on decline. Science, in decline. So what are they focusing on in the magazine? Let's listen to this. Do you think these are the people who are going to sort things out? Got a quote, an inspiring quotation on the contents page. Given the many great initiatives underway at the moment, it requires all of us involved or interested in Scottish education to listen actively and be open to new ideas as we build the next normal in Scottish education. Right, what does that say? What content was there in that quote that's been highlighted because it's so significant? Does it say anything? No. Contentless. What else have we got? The University of the West of Scotland launches new Holocaust education resource. I wouldn't say it's an obsession, but there's a very strong theme of Holocaust education in Scotland. Now, in a sense, I think that's a good thing. We learn the lessons of history, and that's certainly something that there's a lot of lessons to learn from. But you do wonder why there's such an emphasis on that and so little on the horrors of communist regimes through the 20th century, whose death toll was, maybe 20 times higher. I mean, they don't get any mention at all, but the Holocaust, you go back to it again and again. And often the narrative of the Holocaust is it sounds a little bit like, see what happens when your country is not left-wing enough. This is where you end up. Okay. Whereas all those hundreds of millions, about 100 million people who were killed basically in the name of equality in communist regimes, well, that doesn't quite make it to the curriculum. GTCS has got a new chief executive and registrar, first female. I mean, as if that's a significant breakthrough. I mean, is there any surprise at all whether a man or a woman gets a job like that now? I mean, is it any story that that's a female? It really isn't. Closing the attainment gap. Again, not increasing standards overall. That's not the target. It's just getting good schools and not so good schools to the same level. That's what it's all about. United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, written into Scots law. General Teaching Council for Scotland welcomes that. I made a video explaining some of the problems with that. But has that got anything to do with actually teaching better? Actually, the kids learning more of these core skills? Nothing. Right, on to the next page. A few more bits of news. A target of 4% of teaching background to come from Black, Asian, minority ethnic background by 2030, up from 1.6% in 2019. So they've got to find 200 more teachers from ethnic minority backgrounds. 49% of all minority ethnic teachers felt that discrimination relating to their ethnic background was a barrier to gaining promotion. I find that very difficult to believe. Right, the new boss at GTCS, what does she have to say? Now is the time for the profession to decide how our collective experiences can inform the future of Scottish education. I mean, what does that say? Just nothing. Next article. Where next for education in Scotland? Evolution or revolution? I mean, what sort of question is that? I mean, there's no change. Learning is messy, noisy, and unpredictable, but we still expect conformity and uniformity to be the environment. In other words, some teachers still expect children to sit still and get on with the work that they're given, rather than like wandering around doing what they feel like. That's obviously not the way they want to go. The new professional standards. So a quote from someone saying that social justice and equity are at the heart of all we do. Social justice and equity, politically charged themes. So basically political indoctrination is at the heart of what they do. Right, next page here. The impact of a non-diverse profession on children. Okay, not how can we teach them maths better? How can we get them to behave better? No, the impact of a non-diverse profession. Next page. Scotland leads the way on children's rights. They've come up already. What's the difference is that going to make to literacy? Nothing at all. This page has got nothing on. Very interesting. These pages I'm skipping. It's not because they've got like anything about maths or English or proper education on. It's just as like adverts and things. Next one. Teaching race equality to the profession. So I assume they think like teachers are very racist and they need this educating out of them. I mean, come on. Right, how's the profession going to develop? Well, diversity is the key. Right, here's something about actually teaching something. I have actually, for the first part, got something about a positive thing about teaching content to young people. What's the topic? Dance. How dance is helping pupils learn and raise attainment. Okay, something about using computers. Are we about there? I think that well-being. There's the Gaelic page. Bringing STEM and social sciences together. STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, social sciences. That seems like it's about teaching. Is it going to be about how to teach basic numeracy better? No, it's about how to bring subjects together to teach about climate change and basically to produce political activists. So that's the magazine. That's the magazine. Like if this was the British Medical Journal, the equivalent would be there would be no articles in it at all, about treatments for the most common medical conditions, for cancer and heart disease or whatever. There wouldn't be any of that. It would all be about peripheral issues. But that's the teaching profession, sadly. I mean, it really needs challenging again and again and again by people within it and also people outside the profession. Right, how are we doing for questions? Right, I've got some questions from Twitter as well. Let's see. Stonewall, there's an interesting one. Stonewall have been showing up for the radical group that they are recently. Right, curriculum for excellence relegated to the dustbin. Well, I think we were the first party to make that our policy, scrapping the curriculum for excellence. A few other small parties seem to copy us on that one. The Conservatives, they agreed and supported the curriculum for excellence through every stage of its development, and they've never called for it to be scrapped. I mean, that's just classic Conservatives in the Scottish Parliament. Even though at every point it was really obvious that it was just embodying the worst of progressive teaching ideology. Teaching is not the right word. Childcare ideology. They went along with it all the way. But that's where it needs to go. Stonewall, that's an interesting one. Stonewall have been getting a bit of flack recently, haven't they? And a few big organizations have been ditching them. So that's interesting. So I think that hopefully that will snowball, and Stonewall will lose some of its influence. Having said that, I mean, is the job done though? Is it going to make much difference if these big organizations don't pay Stonewall in particular? Will they just find someone else to give their money to instead? Will it change the ethos? I don't know, but it's certainly good news that Stonewall is getting a bit of bad publicity at the moment. I mean, Stonewall tried to get me fired years and years ago. They used to have a thing in Scotland. What was it called? It was called Bigot of the Year Award. And one year that they had nominees, and then they announced the winner at a gala dinner, along with other awards. And one year, I think there's a Catholic bishop was up for it, etc. And it got a bit of bad publicity. So I wrote to Stonewall and said, can you confirm, is this going ahead? Because I'm about to write a letter to a newspaper about it. So can you just tell me, is this going ahead? And they replied saying, yes, it is. And this is why it needs to go ahead. This is how bad these people are. So I replied just saying, well, I don't think it's that clear cut. I'm not sure that's what those people were meaning or whatever. And that was that. But Stonewall sort of tracked me down to my employer and phoned up the headmaster of the school where I was working and basically said to him, well, I didn't say it, but the sort of implication of, what are you going to do about this? What action are you going to take against this member of staff? So I phoned, he called me in to speak to me. I phoned up the Christian Legal Centre, and they said, oh, Stonewall, they're forever doing this. We're always getting phone calls from people where Stonewall have complained to their employer. And they said, if you were working for some education authority in London, you might well be out of a job now. But as it was, it all passed over. It was no big deal. But that's Stonewall, certainly no friends of mine, and certainly not on the wavelength with the Scottish Family Party. Another problem with Stonewall is they promote co-parenting. The idea that, let's say you've got a gay man in a relationship with a man over here, a lesbian in a relationship with a woman over here, and let's say one of the men and one of the women fancy having a baby, but their partners in their sexual relationships don't fancy it. So what Stonewall recommends is, well, one of the men and one of the women, why don't they get together, make a baby together, and then they could share the child between the two households. Then the child has two dads in one house, two mums in the other, and floats between them. Because as far as Stonewall are concerned, what this is all about is giving adults what they want. So if adults want a child, Stonewall's mission is to enable them to have a child by whatever means necessary. And the thing that doesn't enter their thinking is what's best for the child. Does a child need a mum and dad? Is it ideal to bring a child effectively into a broken home, really? It's like having parents who split up and step-parents. But Stonewall doesn't care about anything about that. All they're interested in is giving adults what they want. So yeah, long may Stonewall's challenges continue. Yep, let's see. Yeah, Jephthah's Children is a great book. Yeah, that's a book about young people who are brought up by same-sex parents, and they speak about their experiences, particularly in later life, of the way they really felt about that. Whereas at the time, often children of same-sex parents were under a lot of pressure. Because I mean, imagine, you're a 15-year-old and you say to your two mums, "I really wish I had a dad. There's something wrong here." I mean, how's that going to go down? That's a pretty big step to say that. So often young people don't say it through their teenage years, but then sometimes when they get into their 20s, then they speak about it more openly. A very good book on this as well is Them Before Us, I remember the name, by Katie Faust. Katie Faust has been on this live stream. I was actually making a list of guests to re-invite. We need to get her back again because she was brilliant on this issue. All right. So let's move on to some of the questions we had on Twitter. Right, the Scottish Libertarian Party. They interact with us on Twitter from time to time. They often got something interesting to say. So this time, for anyone just about to put their children into the state education system, what age do you think they will be before you convince the government to see things your way and then persuade the teaching unions to implement your policy? So in other words, if you're engaging politically to change education policy, it's not going to happen in time for your own children, is the point. Right, what would you say in reply to that? Maybe put something in the comments. That's an interesting question, isn't it? What would I say? One thing I would say is it's not about just my children, our children. I would always encourage people, obviously you're concerned for your own children. You don't want them to be corrupted and basically sort of harmed by the education that they get. Okay, so you take what steps you can to prevent that from happening. But then politically, it's not about our children. It's about future, everyone's children and future generations as well. So even if it's a long process to make the change, then that's still a worthy goal. So even if it takes 10 years to get some progress or longer even, the fact that that happens is a positive thing because that will be to the benefit of children. And that's what it's all about. Now, what the libertarians are getting at, obviously, what their main point would be, you should just give up on state education because the government runs it. If the government runs it, it's going to be rubbish and they're going to misuse it. So really, we shouldn't have state education. We should work it out some other way. Now, I would say that goes too far. However, the idea of, for example, like vouchers, so every parent has a voucher that they can sort of effectively spend at a school. So there's more choice for parents about which school to go to. Now, obviously, if you're in a little village on the Scottish island, that's not really going to be much use to you. But within a city, there might be more of a place, particularly at secondary level, for schools to be allowed more freedom, autonomy, to present themselves differently, and then let parents choose which ones they like. Now, a downside of that, again, is that I think there's something really healthy about going to a local school, so your friends are local, and they're in the streets around you. There's lots of people you can see easily. I think that's a really healthy and a good thing, and you tend to lose that if people start traveling further to go to school. So interesting question. Right, another question we had from Twitter. Why did you opt for the Scottish Family Party? I'm sure plenty of us would like to see you down south. Now, that's something we hear quite often. Why do we choose Scottish Family Party? Well, because we're Scottish. The party started in Scotland, focused on Scottish elections, and basically our vision is for Scotland, the Scottish electoral system, and to engage this political scene in Scotland. Now, does that mean that we wouldn't operate or have some parallel parties in other parts of the country? We certainly would. We've actually got registered with the Electoral Commission any party with family in the name. So if someone wanted to start an English family party, they wouldn't be allowed to do that apart from under our umbrella. Now, we've had people in Wales interested in starting a Welsh family party. There were murmurings of a London family party at one point. Now, if someone, or preferably a group of people, came forward and said, yeah, we would like to do this, we'd like to push this forward, And if they'd got the the abilities, the resources, the initiative, the energy to do that, then we would back that. And we could offer a lot of help to a party starting in a different part of the United Kingdom if people came forward. So Gavin, it was Gavin who put that on Twitter. If you're that person, or if you know a group of people who might be interested in doing that, then get in touch. We could explore it. And the last question came up on Twitter. This is a question I found myself answering quite often recently, but here it is again. Do you have a policy on gay marriage? And the answer is no, we don't have a policy on same-sex marriage. Personally, I disagree with it. I would imagine most members of the Scottish Family Party disagree with this, but I know not all. Not all. That's definitely true. So why don't we have a policy on it? People could say, well, look, this is where a lot of the problems started. So if you're saying the ideal is children brought up by their mother and father, introducing same-sex marriage has really undermined that principle within society. And I would say I completely agree. I think that has been a consequence of the introduction of same-sex marriage. I think the whole way that LGBT issues are presented in schools as well has been influenced by the introduction of same-sex marriage. So I think there have been a lot of consequences that are not positive. So why don't we want to have it our policy to repeal it? Because if we think, for example, about the issue of thinking the ideal is a child to be brought up by their mother and father, biological mother and father, where that's possible. If that's the ideal, we decided the best way to promote that would be to directly and explicitly promote that ideal, rather than trying to go back and say, we wish there wasn't same-sex marriage. If we could get rid of that, then maybe we could change some of these other issues. Because as soon as people hear that you're against same-sex marriage, I mean, that's going to be the discussion. Every interview you give, if you say, what do you know about the Scottish Family Party, they're against same-sex marriage. I mean, lots of people think that in any case, even though we're not. So we thought it wouldn't be a good focus to have. We would rather focus on the positive ideal of natural family life. Our policy does say that people should be free to express their disagreement with same-sex marriage, and they should also be free to refrain from taking part in them or their associated activities as well. So that's our take there. Gay couples having children. Now, our policy is that we wouldn't fund fertility treatment apart from for heterosexual couples in a long-term relationship. As far as fostering and adoption is concerned, married heterosexual parents are preferable. That's an advantage. Other things being equal, that is an advantage for a couple. So they're quite modest policies. They're extremely controversial, but they're actually quite modest. And again, they stem from our underlying philosophy that what this is all about is giving children what they need, not giving adults what they want. Whereas generally in society, the ultimate goal is giving adults what they want. And if you try and be some sort of impediment to adults getting what they want, then you're just seen as a real horrible, bad person you're just evil, full of hatred. Whereas actually, you're trying to ensure that children get what they need, which is something I'm not ashamed of in the slightest. Richard cares more about Scotland than any members of the SNP. Now, that's an interesting one, isn't it? How much do you care for the country? Now, wouldn't it be a fascinating experiment? Wouldn't it be fascinating if in the Scottish Parliament, let's say, we could split them in half randomly. This is just a thought experiment. You split them in half randomly, and then we do like a matrix thing, and we simulate a different future for half of them. So half of them we leave in the current Parliament, and half of them we put into a fantasy Parliament where the Scottish Family Party is suddenly the majority. All the media have become socially conservative. Like promoting marriage, everyone's saying it's all the film stars, every newspaper, the BBC, everyone's just saying we need to promote marriage, we need to get stable family life. Everyone's become pro-life. People are horrified at abortion. What would happen to that half of the MSPs we'd got in that half of the experiment? How many of them would change their views? Take a guess. How many would you think? I would guess a substantial majority. I would think a good 70 or 80% would just shift. I mean, the Greens, you're not going to get the Greens over. I don't think you wouldn't get Nicola Sturgeon either. I mean, she is genuinely committed to these causes. But then there's an awful lot of other ones who would just go whichever, they would just go with the flow. If the direction of flow changed, they would just change direction with it. So online, we're not going with the flow. We're not just doing what we think is going to help make life easier for ourselves or is going to get the most votes, whatever. We're doing what we think is going to be best for the country, best for our society, best for families, best for children, best for human life in general. So yeah, that's a nice point. Right, I've just got 5 minutes left. I need to remind you, if you're watching on Facebook, if you could click subscribe if it's there, and the bell to get notifications, that would be great. If you want to make sure you don't miss this in the future, you can do the same on YouTube as well. I'll also mention again, in case you missed the beginning, as of next week, we're moving to a Tuesday 9 till 10 slot. Tuesdays 9 till 10 starting next week. So hopefully you'll be able to make that, and we'll see you there. Right, so we've got someone here saying trans rights. Okay, trans rights are human rights. That's right. Trans people should have human rights the same as everyone else. Absolutely. I'm not sure what point you're making there. Anyway, I've got one last education story to look at. Well, I've spoken before about the exam fiasco that we're in the midst of. I'm increasingly of the view that there are not going to be exams in Scotland again after the pandemic. I think they're going to go. That's what the Greens want. What do I always say? What the Greens want, they get. Okay, the Greens say it. 2 years later, the SNP, Labour and Lib Dems, they're all saying it as well. A year after that, all the Conservatives agree with it as well. So the Greens say scrap exams, so it's likely to be what's happening. So as you know, what's happened? They've scrapped exams this year. So therefore, schools are having to do their own thing. I mean, it's been a disaster. There are going to be inconsistencies. The test papers they used have been shared on the internet in a lot of cases. Different teachers will mark differently. The government has already said there won't be any moderation. So if a school in a really tough area that's results previously have been quite low, if suddenly they get almost everyone gets an A, they've said we're not going to correct them. Just whatever you come up with, we're not going to change them. That's it. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. People got to recognize the conflicts of interest in teachers, in head teachers. If you're a head teacher, you want your school to do well, partly because you're concerned for the young people, and partly because it reflects well on you and shows you've done a good job. And so putting exam grades in the hands of the staff and leadership of a school is a really dire conflict of interest. And add alongside that the belief that probably all the other similar schools are going to be playing the system to the maximum extent as well. So if you don't, you'll probably be left behind and your school will look like it's failing. I mean, it's a disaster waiting to happen. But what's come out today is the appeals process. And the government said you'll be able to appeal the grades if you think the teacher's judgment was wrong, or if you think there's been a mistake, in sort of data processing mistake, or if you think there's an equality issue. I wonder what that means. I mean, maybe it means that they didn't make provision for your disability, but why would that be an appeal? Why wouldn't you deal with that beforehand, before the exam? Maybe it means that you're going to claim that the teacher discriminated against you. I mean, I wonder what's going to happen. Watch this space. Let's see what emerges. But the government said that if you appeal against an exam result, it might, it's very unlikely, but it might actually go down. It might stay the same, or it might go up. And already the Greens, even the Conservatives, are saying, this is an outrage. If you appeal an exam result, it can't go down. It can't be a gamble. But that's absolutely what it should be. If the teacher's given a grade, and you're saying, well, I don't trust that teacher's grade, I want someone else to look at it and see what they think. Well, if you decide that's what you want to happen, then that's what needs to happen. And it might be someone comes along, looks at the work, at the evidence that teacher's got, and says, no, that's too optimistic. There's no way that was actually worth a B. That's got to be worth a C. But the whole thing's become politicized. So the political parties, the Greens, Labour in particular, they're saying to 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, obviously who can now vote, and their message is more or less, we think the SNP government is not going to give you high enough grades. We think you probably deserve better. They probably haven't given you a fair chance. If we were the government, we probably would have got you higher grades. I mean, that is the matter. It's not quite that obvious, but that's basically what they're saying. And it's a major flaw in the process. It's partly with letting 16-year-olds vote. It's partly with cancelling exams. And it's partly the cynical opportunism of some of the political parties. Now, for the Greens, their objective is to make the whole system seem like a totally unfair mess, which it is. It's inevitable. Once you've cancelled exams, it is going to be a total mess. So they'll be saying this is a total mess, which just shows we should give up on the idea of standardized assessments completely. As I say, what the Greens say is what happens. Now, that is 1 minute past 9, so I'll finish there. Now, next week, I say we'll have different parts to the show. That will be a bit of a different format, so I hope you enjoy that. You're looking forward to that. But that is Tuesday at 9 p.m. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for your comments, and see you next week.